After God created Adam, and Adam had been in the garden for a while, he started to get a little lonely. So Adam went to God and said,
This garden is amazing, but I'm getting a little bit lonely. Is there anyone you could make to keep me company?
I have the perfect person. She will help you with almost everything. She'll clean, cook, wash your clothes, be your friend. She'll agree with everything you say, and she will even volunteer every night to rub your feet after a long day. She really is perfect in every way.
That sounds great. How soon can you make her?
I can make her right away, but there's one thing. It is literally going to cost you an arm and a leg to get her.
What can I get for a rib?
Did you ever wonder what it would be like to be the first man and woman on Earth? I mean, Adam and Eve were created beings, so you wonder what things were like. Like, for example, what age were they made? I mean, God didn't make them as babies, so what did He make them as? I mean, were they already in their teens? Were they physically in their 20s? When Adam was he created with a full beard or with no facial hair? When Eve was she created with hairy legs and armpits? What were their hairstyles when God made them? What were their links? What was the dew? Were they created with belly buttons? I mean, belly buttons come because of the umbilical cord, but if there wasn't any umbilical cord, would they have had belly buttons? There are all questions that I think would be interesting to ask Adam and Eve. And if I had a time machine that would allow me to bring them here, I'd have all sorts of things that I would want to ask them. But there would be one question that I would ask first. Do you know what that question would be? How in the world could you guys mess this up? I mean, seriously. Seriously. God creates man and woman, and He puts them in the Garden of Eden, and He puts them in charge of the animals. And seriously, that's all they have to do. That's all they have to do. All they literally have to do is watch over the animals. One of the easiest jobs in all of history, other than being a pastor, of course. I mean, I work 1 day a week, except I record this now, so I work 2 days a week. This virus is awful. So Adam and Eve are created, and how many rules does God give them? One rule. He gave them one little rule. In Genesis 2:16, God says to man, "You are free to eat from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. For when you eat of it, you will surely die." Okay, so do whatever you want. You guys have some freedoms, but there is one poisonous tree in the garden. In the garden, there's one poisonous tree. Don't eat from it. Why? It's poisonous. One rule. How hard is it to follow one rule?
Dana, no water balloons today, okay?
Okay.
Gina!
Well, I guess for some people it might be harder to follow than for others. And it certainly doesn't take Eve very long to break that one rule that she was given, doesn't she? Women. In the first verse of chapter 3, we find the devil on the scene in the form of a serpent or a snake. And the devil comes up to Eve and simply asks, "Did God really say that you must not eat from any tree in the garden?" And Eve replied,
Holy cow, talking snake.
Okay, that's not what she said. Well, I don't know. Maybe it is what she said, but that's not what the Bible recorded. Maybe she said that first, and then the Bible recorded what came afterwards. Eve responded,
You may eat fruit from the trees in the garden, but God did say you must not eat fruit from the tree in the middle of the garden, for you must not touch it, or you will die.
And here's where things start to go wrong, because the devil answers her back, You will not surely die, for God knows that when you eat, your eyes, that's like the snake hissing, I don't know if you got that, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. And this is where Eve should have been like, Get out of here. Go. Get out of here. You are not messing up my cake job. I got one thing to do. You are not ruining this for me. But that's not what she says. Instead, she decides she's going to walk over to the tree that she was told not to go near because the tree was going to kill her, and try to figure out who's telling the truth. And yeah, this is a real mystery of who's telling the truth. Should I believe the all-powerful, almighty, all-knowing God who just created me and my husband, or should I believe a weird talking snake? Yeah, that's a tough one. So Eve walks over to the tree. She looks at the fruit, and it looks pretty good. And it smells pretty good. And she decides she'd like to be a little bit smarter. I mean, who wouldn't? And she knows that God told her not to do it. But what's one little bite going to hurt, right? And right there you have it. Case closed. If you want to find somebody to blame for all of our problems in the world, who do you blame?
Women.
Women. Ladies, you really dropped the ball on this one. I mean it. God told you one little thing not to do. He told you one little thing not to do, and you couldn't resist, and you couldn't say no. And even worse than that, you got all of us innocent guys pulled right in with you into this big giant mess that you made. Verse 6. She also gave some to her husband, who was with her, and he ate it. See? You did it. You did it. What?
Read it again.
Fine. She also gave some to her husband, who was with her, and he ate it. Wow, way to ruin the party. Thanks a lot. So, yes, Eve did the talking, but Adam was right there from the beginning making that same exact mistake. Adam could have stepped in at any moment and said, Eve, this is a really bad idea. I think we better just leave this tree alone. But he didn't. He stood there, just watching her having a conversation with a snake like a bump on a log. and then letting her try it first to see whether or not it was poisonous and was going to kill her. There's some real chivalry for you there. You said chivalry was dead. Clearly not. Here, babe, try this. See if you die. I've got a couple more ribs to spare, just in case. You know what I mean? So they disobey God. They eat the fruit. They ruin the world. They realize that they're naked and put on some fern pants. And they hide from God. And God calls out to them and he says, have you eaten from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from? And Adam responds, oh, gee whiz, God, I am so sorry. I really messed up. I need to apologize for what I've done. Said no guy ever. No, he doesn't. He doesn't apologize. He doesn't take accountability for it. What does he do? What does the big man that just made his wife possibly eat the poisonous fruit do? He points at Eve and he says,
She made me do it.
oh yeah. And Eve figures, I'm not taking the blame for this one. So she says,
Hey, don't blame me. The serpent talked me into it.
and there you have it, folks. The first people to pass the buck were the very first people. Have you ever heard that phrase before? Pass the buck. Have you heard that? I wonder where that came from.
Passing the buck originated from a ritual practice during card games. Card players used to place a marker called a buck in front of the person who was the dealer. That marker was passed to the next player along with the responsibility of dealing. Eventually, passing the buck became synonymous with passing on responsibility.
That's better than asking Alexa, don't you think? Thank you very much. Pass the buck. Pass the buck, it refers to when somebody does something wrong, but they don't want to be the one to take the blame for it. And I feel like we live in a world where people are constantly passing the buck. Nobody ever does anything anymore that's their fault. Someone else is always to blame for what happens. Follow any politician and you will see that their opponent is awful. But anything that went wrong in their life or in their career happened because of somebody else. Watch any young boy lose at Fortnite, and you will see or hear very loudly that the other person cheated. They cheated. It's never their fault. If we get angry, it's not just that we got angry, it's that someone made me mad. See, it's their fault. If we don't change our oil and we blow up our engine, it's Ford's fault for making a faulty engine. If I spill coffee and burn my lap, it's McDonald's fault. If I get a ticket, it is definitely the cop's fault. If we get fat, it's COVID-19's fault. That one's true though. Like that one is that actually is true. The rest of them not, but that one is. If we fail a test, whose fault is it? It's not our fault. It's the teacher's fault. They clearly didn't teach as well as they should have. If I have a heart attack from stress, whose fault is it? It's God's fault for letting it happen. That's right, folks. Not even God can escape the blame game. I mean, the world constantly denies his existence until they need him to blame something on, and then he's real for that short moment in time because it's his fault. And God, he's been getting blamed for stuff from the very beginning. From the very, very beginning. Listen to what Adam says when God asks him what happened. Verse 12.
The woman you put here, she gave me some fruit and I ate
it. Whose fault is it that Adam ate the fruit? It's God's fault because he put the woman there in the first place. Man, if he wouldn't have done that, we wouldn't have been in this mess. God should have known better than that. Anything that we do wrong in our lives can always be traced to the guy standing next to us, or better yet, the big guy up there. Adam blamed God and Eve. Eve blamed the serpent. And we blame everybody else. Right now in our nation, we have protests, we have counter-protests, and we have counter-protests. And every protester is blaming someone else for ruining America. Democrats blame the Republicans and vice versa. Donald Trump is almost as guilty of ruining the world as Barack Obama was before him, and George Bush was before him, and Bill Clinton was before him. Our nation is falling to pieces, and everyone is pointing at everyone else to tell you exactly why it's happening. If you listened to last week's sermon, then you heard me talk to you about how our society every day is allowing hate to split us right down the middle. And instead of searching for things that we have in common, we focus on one or two little things that we disagree on and then pretend like it is a giant chasm too big for us to ever consider crossing. And that line, whatever that line is that we have drawn in the sand, on whatever the particular issue happens to be on that day, instead of coming close, both sides coming close to that line so that we can talk about it, so that we can dialogue about it. Instead, we use our time to take shovel after shovel out of that sand that line was drawn in and purposefully and willfully create a chasm that is wider and wider and wider. There is no dialogue anymore. There is only hurtful words and rhetoric. That's it. That's all there is. I am right, you are wrong, and you are to blame. The buck is yours. And two things happen in your life when your life is consumed by blaming others. The first thing that happens is you fail to grow as a believer. You see, Christian growth happens when you allow God to open your eyes to truths about yourself. And these truths that he opens your eyes to, they can lead to small changes in your thoughts and actions and help you to continue to become the person that he has designed for you to be. But if you are so preoccupied with yelling at everyone else and passing the buck, then there's actually no chance for you to grow in your life. Let me give you an example. Our country has been in an uproar over the murder of George Floyd. And with this murder, a line was drawn in the sand, and people took their sides and immediately started digging and widening that chasm. I'm sure that you have mentally taken note of where you fall on that line. But did you ever stop for a minute in the midst of all of this and think about your own heart? Did you take the time to stop and truly think about how you view other races and if there is any room for you to grow? Sadly, I would say that most of us and most of the nation hasn't taken the time to talk to God about ourselves because we're too busy telling him how to fix everyone else. So the first danger in passing the buck is the complete lack of spiritual growth in your life. As Christians, there's a second thing that's even worse when we pass the buck. As if our own lack of spiritual growth wasn't bad enough. There's something that's even worse than that. As Christians, our number one goal throughout our entire lives should be telling others about Jesus and his love. That, folks, should be our number one goal, the number one goal of each and every one of us. Without Jesus, there is no forgiveness of sins. There is no salvation for someone's soul. Do you understand that there is nothing in life that even comes close to the importance of that message? Nothing. And there is a timer that is counting down every single day on how much time we have left to tell someone about God's love before it's too late. And the best way to bring someone to Jesus, well, it's through meaningful and loving dialogue. That's how it's done. I'm going to toss two Christian cliches at you for a second, okay? The first is this. People don't know. That's not it. No, the first is this. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. You see that? People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And the second one, you may be the only Bible that some people ever read. Oh, wow, Pastor, those are kind of heavy. Yeah, they are. And do you completely understand what they're saying? You can have all of the right answers to all of the spiritual questions, but guess what? If you don't live it, if you don't love them before you try to present them with the truth, your words become meaningless. And sometimes not even just meaningless, they become detrimental because they think, if being a Christian means I turn into that hateful person, then I'm not interested. You see, as Christians, for far too long, we've gotten sucked into this practice of not only drawing the line in the sand, but digging those lines out and turning them into chasms that will never allow us to have any dialogue, let alone meaningful conversations about faith. It is hard to hear a message of love when it is surrounded by words of hate. Guys, there's no passing the buck on this one. We, me, you, not everyone else, we must find a way to love all races, all genders, all political affiliations, all stereotypes, all sexual orientations, all religions. Guys, we must love all. We must love all so that we can save some. Does that mean that we have to agree with everything? No. No, there's going to be a lot of things that we don't agree with, but a dialogue can't start, and hearts can't be won unless it all starts with love. It's time to fill that chasm. It's time to fill it in so that we can walk to the edge of the line and maybe even cross it. Because that walk could save someone's soul. Whose fault is it that people aren't hearing the love of Jesus in my words because of the shots that I'm firing? It's mine. Say it. Say, it's mine. Today the buck stops here. That chasm, it can be closed. But it's got to start with us. And it's got to start with love. That's it for today. Thanks for watching.
Dana, you're supposed to hit me.